Hello everyone and welcome back to Coding Monk. In this part of the series, I am going to show you how we can render this contact information, and along with that, we are also going to make this toggle functionality. Then we are going to see how we can create this menu for displaying this media, links and docs which are shared in our conversation. Then we are also going to create a tab for share start messages, as you can see here. So to build this, we need to manage the state of our app. So I'm going to first show you how to set up the Redux in our app. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to show you how we can create this type of dialog for blocking or deleting this chat. Okay. So I hope you find this interesting. If yes, then make sure to watch this video till the end, and also make sure to subscribe to this channel and press the thumb icon on this video. So now we know that we need to create a sidebar here at the right side. Okay, so what we are going to do, just like we have rendered this chats conversation inside general app, we also need to create a third section here which will be used for rendering that contact information. So let's navigate to the pages folder which is inside source, then go to dashboard, and inside that we need to make changes to general app file. Okay, so here at the end you can see we have a stack, then inside that there is this chat section. After that we have rendered this conversation inside this box. Now the third thing that we need to do is to render the contact information here, okay, inside this stack. So this contact or the sidebar is going to be the third component that we will be rendering here. We have made a comment for that. Now let's move on to the components folder inside source. Then I'm going to create here a file called contact.js. Okay, so let's create a functional component here. Okay, let's save this. Now we are going to use the same contact component here. Okay, at this place. So I have imported it. Okay, so now it's imported from the components folder and we are using it right like this. So now what we are going to do, we need to use the box component which is provided by Material UI. Okay, so I have imported it, as you can see here. Okay, now we need to provide it some width. So I'm going to use this SX prop which is used for styling any Material UI component, just like the style attribute. Okay, now we can give it a width. So I'm going to give it a width of 320, just like we have given a width of 320 to this chats. So let's save this. And now you can see that we have this section here, but it's actually making the app to scroll in the horizontal direction. And that is because we have provided this conversation component width of 100 VW, that means 100% of the viewport width, minus 100 of this sidebar, and 320 of this chats component, that is 420. Now we also need to adjust the width that we have provided here. So what we are going to do, let's get inside the general app, and now here we need to subtract 320 more, that means total of 740. Okay, so let's write it here. Now after saving this, you can see the horizontal scroll is gone and this section is now looking much better. Now we need to focus on how we can toggle this on and off, like when I click on this avatar component or this contact. So for that we are going to actually use state in our app, and to manage the state inside this app we are going to use Redux. So let's now get on to Redux setup. So the first thing that we are going to do is to create a folder inside source, and I'm going to call it Redux. Okay, so now the first thing that we need here is a store. Okay, that is our Redux store. So let's create this file store.js. Here we are going to import few things. Okay, so we will need this thing called configure store, which is going to come from a library called Redux toolkit. Okay, so let's write here redux.js slash toolkit. Now we also need to install this npm package. So let's open this terminal here. Okay, now I'm going to write npm I redux.js / toolkit. Okay, let's install it. Now you can see that I have installed this package. Now the next thing that we are going to need is use dispatch and use selector, and they are going to come from react-redux library. So let's import use dispatch. Okay, and I'm going to rename it as use app dispatch. Okay, so we can use this as keyword to rename our imports. So let's write this. Okay, and we are also going to import another thing called use selector, and again I am going to rename it as use app selector. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now we are going to import it from a library called react-redux. Now we are going to install this library. Okay, so let's write here npm I react-redux. Okay, now after this is done, we are going to again import few other things, and this is going to come from a library known as redux persist. So let me first import it, then I'm going to explain you what is the purpose of using this. Okay, for redux persist, so we are going to import these two things, persist store and persist reducer, and these are going to come from the library called as redux persist. Okay, let's also install this. So I'm going to write npm I redux persist. Now after we are done with this, let's now understand the usage of all these things. Since we are using redux to manage the state of our app, so we are going to need a react binding of redux. That means redux implementation for react, so that is contained inside this react redux library, and we are going to use these things available inside this library, use dispatch and use selector. And to make things easier for us, there is another library known as redux.js toolkit. So this is actually going to make the code that we write much cleaner and easy to understand. So that's why we are using redux toolkit in our project. And the third library that we are using is redux persist. So redux persist is basically going to allow us to persist the data. Okay, that means if we close the tab or if we refresh the page, then the state is going to be persisted. That means it won't be lost. Now the next thing that we are going to do is to first of all create the store. So there, that's actually very simple. So we just need to use this thing configure store, call it, and then pass some options to it. So the first thing is it is going to take some reducer. Okay, and this reducer is actually going to get a config, okay, and a combined reducer. So we are going to make that, and then we will add those here. Now the next thing that we need to give it is middleware. So middleware is actually a function, okay, that can run in between writing and reading from our store. So we are going to use this middleware, and it's going to get its first argument, which will be a function. Okay, let's call it get default middleware. Now we need to call this get default middleware, and then we need to pass it some options. So the first option that we are going to pass it serializable check, and that is going to be false, and the other thing is immutable check. So to explain these things, what these options are doing here, okay, and why are we configuring our store just like this, I'm going to create another series just for redux. For now you can just understand that this is our store which is going to contain some piece of information. Okay, and we have something known as reducer and middleware. Now there is one more thing. To make our state persistable, we will need to modify it. So what we are going to do, we are going to wrap this store inside something known as persist store. So this is the thing, like persist store, we are just going to pass our original store to this, and this will give us this modified store which we are calling persister. Okay, now out of this store we can get this dispatch. Okay, and it will be used to dispatch actions, okay, from our components. And in the similar way, I am going to call this use app selector. I'm going to call it use selector. Okay, then we will be exporting it from here, and then using inside our components to fetch the state from our store. So let's write use app selector just like this. We also need to export this use dispatch. Okay, so use dispatch is basically going to be a function which is actually going to call this use app dispatch that we have imported from the react-redux library. Now the last thing that we need to do in this file is to export these things that we have created here. So the first thing that will be exported is the store, and the next is persister. Okay, this, and then we are going to export dispatch, use selector, and use dispatch. So now we just need to get the root configuration and the combined reducer, and then we need to just insert those here. So let's now create a new file inside this Redux folder, and we are going to call it root reducer. So root reducer is actually going to take all of the slices that we will be creating, and it will combine all the reducers. Okay, here the first thing that we need is we need to import something known as combine reducer. Combine reducers is actually available inside the Redux library. Okay, so we are going to use it from the Redux. So let's write here import combine reducers from Redux, and since we have not installed this package just yet, so I'm going to write here npm redux. Okay, let's install it, and then after this we are also going to need some storage. Okay, so we need access to storage, and we can get that by just writing a import here like import storage from redux persist. So the library that I just told you to install, redux persist, it gives us access to our local storage. Okay, so I'm just going to access it just like this. Then we will need to import all of the slices that we will be creating soon. So I'm commenting here slices. Okay, now after this we can just define some root configuration for storing data in our redux store. So I'm going to create here something known as root persist config. Okay, so this is going to define how our data will be stored and read out of the redux store. So the key that we are going to use to store and fetch data will be root. Okay, then we are going to use this storage from redux persist, which is going to be the local storage of our web browser. And then we can also pass another option which is known as key prefix. So this will be used as a prefix when storing or retrieving data out of our store. So I'm just going to give this key prefix redux dash. Okay, now there are more things, so I just want to tell you about these two things which are very important here. Like we can define a whitelist and a blacklist. So these are going to be array. We can define the name of the reducers, okay, that we don't want to persist. Okay, and we can also define the name of the state that we want to persist. So here we want everything to be persisted, so I'm not going to use these options. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a combined reducer. So we are going to name it as root reducer, which will be combining all of the other reducers. So let's call this method combine reducers that we just imported from the redux package. Now here we are going to actually define some key pairs. Like in our case, the first reducer that we will be creating will be app. So I'll just call it app reducer, and then we are going to create this. Okay, and at the end we are going to export two things from here. The first one is going to be root persist config. Okay, and the second thing is going to be the root reducer, just like this. Okay, and now we need to worry about what from where we are going to get this app reducer. So for that we are going to create another folder inside redux, and I'm going to call it slices. Okay, so these slices will be made using the redux toolkit package that we just installed. So the first thing that we need to create, the first slice that we want is app. Now we have created this file, and inside here we are going to import a method known as create slice from redux toolkit. Okay, so let's just import create slice. As you can see, we are getting this. So create slice is going to come from redux toolkit, and the second thing that we are going to use is dispatch. Okay, so as you can see, we have exported this dispatch from our store, and we are going to need the dispatch here in order to dispatch the actions. Okay, so let's get the dispatch here, okay, from store, just like this. Now let's define the initial state that we want. Okay, so initial state is basically, we can define an object here simply, and what we need to preserve here, what state we are going to preserve in our app right now is, I need to preserve the state for this sidebar. So I'm just going to write here sidebar. Okay, and inside this sidebar there are going to be two things. First of all, if it's open or not. So by default it's not going to open when our app will launch, so that's why I have initialized it with open false. Okay, and the next thing is, as you can see in our design, we are going to render different types of component like contact information, and then when a user clicks on this media links and docs, then we are going to show the user this component. So we will be rendering different types of component on the same section. So for that I'm going to add another thing here, which will be known as type. So by default, when the sidebar is opened, we will be showing contact. Okay, so I have initialized it with contact. And what are the other possible values? So it can be either contact, okay, which will be by default, or it can also show start messages. So in that case the type will be start, or it can also show the shared documents, media and links. Okay, so in that case the value of type will be shared. Now after we have done this, let's just create our slice quickly. So I'm going to call this slice, and I'm sure you can already guess that we are going to use this create slice method to create the slice, as the name suggests. Now we need to name every slice. Okay, so here we are going to call it app, and then we need to pass the initial state. So we have already defined the initial state here. Okay, and then we have just passed it like this. Then we can define reducers here. Okay, so reducers are actually going to update our state. Okay, so in redux you can update your state by reducers. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is, we need the functionality to toggle the sidebar. So let's just define a method here which will be known as toggle sidebar. Okay, just like this. And let me tell you that every reducer is going to accept two arguments. The first one is going to be the state. Okay, and this state will be the current state of this reducer. Okay, and the second argument is going to be something which is called as action, and action contains basically two things: type of action and payload. So payload is going to contain the information and type will be a string. Now we can just write it like this. When we want to toggle the sidebar, then we basically need to change this value of open. So what I'm going to do in this state, I'm going to access this sidebar with this dot notation. So let's write state dot sidebar, and then we need to access this open value. Then I'm going to set it to its opposite. That means whatever the current value is, if it's true, then it will turn to false, and if it's false, then it will turn to true. I hope you get it. Now we need also another method which will be, or another reducer, that is going to be update sidebar type. Okay, and that is going to be useful when we want to switch between different types of component which will be rendered here. So again I'm going to take these two arguments, state and action. Okay, and here I'm going to show you how this action is useful here. So as you already know, I need to update this type. So first of all we are going to take this state. Okay, and then we are going to this access this property sidebar on it, and then we can access this type property. Okay, and now we are actually going to set its type to whatever this action has to say. Okay, that means this action is actually going to contain something known as payload. So payload is basically an object which can contain some information. Okay, in this information we are going to pass it something known as type. So I'm just going to access it and assign it to the sidebar, and this will update our state. Okay, now we have defined our slice. Okay, we just need to export it from here. export the reducer. So I'm just going to write export default. Okay, this is going to be a default export from here. We just need to export the slice dot reducer. Okay, so slice has various things: actions, case reducer, initial state, name, and reducers. We just need to export this reducer. Okay, this is actually good enough for now. After some time, we are going to again come here. We will be defining some thunk actions here. Okay, so thunk is basically going to perform any asynchronous task in the Redux for us. Okay, now what we can do, we can just import this app reducer from this file. Okay, the thing that we are actually exporting here is the app reducer that we want to use inside the root reducer. So let's just write here import app reducer from, we just need it from the slices folder. So let's just go into the slices folder, and inside that we have this app file from which we can import the app reducer. And now we have created this. Let's just go back to the store file, and as I told you previously, we are going to need to pass a configuration and all the combined reducer to this persist reducer here. So I'm just going to import two things from this root reducer, and those things are root persist config and root reducer inside the store. So let's just get these root persist config and root reducer. Okay, just like this. And we can now pass this persist reducer configuration at this first place. So let's write here root persist config, and at the second place we can give it root reducer. Now after we have done everything that is needed in our Redux folder, the last thing that we need to do is we need to go inside this index.js file, which is the entry point of our app. Now we need to wrap our whole app inside something known as provider, which is going to come from the react-redux library, and I will be importing it after renaming to redux provider. So let's write here redux provider. After wrapping this app with the redux provider, as you can see, we are going to pass it a prop which is called store. Okay, and inside this store the value is going to be our actual store that we just created in the redux folder. So let's import it, and as you can see, we have this store here. Now let's also get this redux provider. So you can just write import provider as a redux provider from react redux. Okay, now after you do all these changes, make sure to restart your app and also get the extension that I just told you. Okay, and after that if you refresh your app, okay, and then if you go to this extensions icon and click on it, you will be able to see this redux dev tools and its icon will turn green. You can also pin it just like I have done it in my case, and if you click on this, then you are going to see something which is called state. Okay, so here you can see we have this app, and inside this we have this property known as sidebar, which is currently true. So this is the Redux setup that we had to do inside our app. Now we are going to create this toggle functionality here, which is actually going to be very easy. So let's now talk about how we can actually create that toggle functionality by just clicking on this avatar component here. Okay, so for that we need to move inside this slices folder that we just created inside the Redux folder. Okay, and inside the app file, now we are going to create two thunk functions which are basically going to perform some async operation for us. Okay, so let me write it here and you will get what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we are just going to define two normal functions. So the first one is going to be toggle sidebar. Okay, this is very simple. You can see we have just defined a function and exported it, and in the similar manner I'm going to define another function and we are going to call it update sidebar type. Okay, because this is basically going to update our sidebar type, like it can be contact, start or shared. Okay, thunk function is going to perform some async operation in the redux life cycle. Okay, so it basically returns an async function. This is a function. Okay, and in order to it to be a thunk, we are basically going to return an async function out of it. Okay, now here we can actually get this dispatch, okay, from our store, and now we can use this dispatch here to dispatch any of the actions. Okay, so we have two actions, toggle sidebar or update sidebar type. So we can just write it here like this, slice. Okay, and on slice, as you know, we have this property actions, and on actions we are going to see two actions, toggle sidebar and update sidebar type. So here we need to toggle sidebar, so I'm just going to select it, and we can just call it like this. And as you can see, in the toggle sidebar we are not actually using action. Okay, so that means we are also not using any payload, so we don't need to provide it with any data whatsoever. Okay, and just like this, we are again going to return an async function out of this update sidebar type. Okay, and then here also we need to call this action up sidebar type. So again we are going to use this dispatch which we got from our store. Okay, so let's write here dispatch, and then again I can write slice dot actions. Okay, then I'll get two actions, and this time I need update sidebar type. And here actually you can see we are using this action dot payload. So whatever we pass here inside these curly brackets will be available as a property of this action dot payload. So we need to pass this type. Okay, so what I am going to do, I will be passing this type property here, and we will be getting it as an argument, okay, in this update sidebar type. So let's just format this code. Okay, and now we are done with this thunk functions, and now we can actually use it inside our component. So what we actually need to do is we need to find this conversation header, and we need to actually attach an on click event listener. Okay, so whenever this avatar is clicked, then we want to call this toggle sidebar. So let me show you how we can do that. So first of all, we are going to navigate to the components folder. Okay, then the conversation folder. Here you can find this header. Now inside this header, so whenever we are going to click on this stack, so I'm going to write this on click here. So whenever this is clicked, then we want to do something here. Okay, let me show you what we are going to do. We are actually going to dispatch those thunk action that we just declared. Okay, so the thing is, so we just need to call the dispatch here. Okay, and inside this I am going to call toggle sidebar. Okay, and as you can see, this toggle sidebar is going to come from the slices app. Okay, and just call the toggle sidebar as well. Now the question is, from where we are actually going to get this dispatch. So to get this, we just need to define here. Okay, we just need to define at the top of our component this dispatch, and we can get it by calling use dispatch. Okay, and use dispatch is going to come from the react-redux library. So as you can see here, from the react-redux library we are using this use dispatch. Okay, now let's save this. Now you can see in our Redux store right now this open value is false. Okay, and let's see what happens after I click on this avatar. Okay, so I have clicked on this avatar, and you can see now the value of open is true. Let me click on it again, and after that we are going to see the value again. So I have clicked there once more, and now you can see the value of open is false. That means we are able to successfully update our store. Now we can use this property of sidebar.open to actually render this component, that means this sidebar, conditionally. Okay, and that is actually going to be straightforward. As you already know, at the start of this tutorial we went inside this general app, and then we rendered this contact here, and we also made a change to the width here. So we just need to apply that condition. Whether the value of sidebar.open is true, then we need to keep the width to this value, otherwise the previous value. And if the sidebar is open, then only we are going to render this component. So now the question is how we are actually going to get the state. That means how we can access this property sidebar.open inside our component. So for that we have a very handy method. Okay, let me just show it to you. So you can use this hook use selector, which is actually going to enable you to select any state out of your Redux store. So use selector is going to come from again react-redux library. Okay, and inside that you need to pass a callback, and this callback, whatever you are going to return from it, that will be that you can access right in front of it. Okay, so we are going to access our app state here. So let me just write, and inside this callback the first argument is store. Okay, our whole store. So inside that store I'm going to return just this app. Okay, so we can write store.app just like this, and now we have access to this app. Okay, let me show it to you by doing a console log first. Okay, so I have written this console log here, app. Let's now open our inspector, and now you can see we got this app, and it has this property sidebar, and it's giving me the current value of open, which is false, and the type, which is contact. I think this is very clear to you how we can access our store inside our component. Okay, now we just need to do one thing. Since we know that this app is basically returning an object, okay, and this object is basically containing this property sidebar, so we can just destructure it right away. So let me write here exact same thing, sidebar. Okay, now we have access to sidebar here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to write here a condition. If sidebar dot open, that means if sidebar dot open is true, so this means that if sidebar dot open is true, then we need to use this width. Okay, with 740 pixel. Okay, which is going to be subtracted from the full view width. Otherwise we are going to keep it to 420, which was the previous value. Okay, so let's save this. And also we are going to place a condition here. We are going to write that if sidebar dot open is true, okay, then only we want this contact component to be rendered onto the screen. So now after you have written this logic and after saving this file, let's go back to our app, and now you can see whenever I'm going to click on this, you can see that the sidebar opens up, and if I again click on it, then the sidebar is closing. And congratulations, you have cleared the most difficult thing that we had to face. Like, let me tell you very honestly, this Redux setup part is the most difficult thing when you are learning it at first. Okay, don't sweat it, you will get a hang of it if you keep trying. Okay, so I'm going to also create a separate series on Redux where I will be explaining each and every concept into a very simple and manageable manner. Okay, so now after we have done this, the only thing that we can focus on is to create this UI. Okay, and this is going to be very simple, so let's do it. Now we have completed our Redux setup, so let's now focus completely on how to build this sidebar contact information. Okay, so as you can see in the Figma design, we need to design this header, okay, in which we will have an icon button on which if we are going to press, then this sidebar will be closed. Okay, and then we need to build the rest of the UI. So let's get started. Now inside our code, as we have already seen, we need to go inside this contact.js file. Okay, because this is where this sidebar component or the contact component is going to lie. Okay, now we have created this box, and that is good. Now there is one more thing that we need to define here, and it's height. So we need to make sure that the height of this box is maximum 100 vh or 100 view height. That means the height of the viewport. Okay, now after this, as you can see, we are going to implement two things, header and the rest of the body of the sidebar. So we are going to need a stack to wrap both of them. Okay, so let's just use this stack from material UI. So I've imported it from material UI. Now direction is going to be column because we need to align two things vertically, and I'm just going to set its height to 100%. Okay, and then to display a box like this, as you can see, this box, this header box is going to have some type of background and also some box shadow. So we are going to use the box component for that purpose here, which is going to come from material UI. Now to provide it some styling, we are going to again use this sx prop. Okay, so first of all we are going to give it box shadow, and this will be 0 pixel left in x direction, 0 pixel in y, 2 pixel in z direction. Okay, and then the color of the shadow is going to be, we are going to define it in RGBA model, so it will be black color with 25% opacity. Okay, so we have defined it like this. Now there is also going to be a width. Okay, so we are going to say the width is going to be 100%, that means total width it can take. Then we also need to define some background color for it, and here we need to define it based on theme. So I'm going to say here, first of all we need to get the theme, and we have done this several times, so I'm just going to write it like theme is equal to use theme, and this use theme is going to come from material UI styles module. So let's just get it quickly. Okay, so I'm going to get it from the rate MUI slash material slash styles. That's okay. Now we need to write here theme dot palette dot mode. So we are going to check if the mode is light, then we are going to use the color that is defined in our Figma file, and that is F8 FAFF. Okay, otherwise we are going to use the color theme dot palette dot background, just like this. Now we have defined the properties, CSS properties for this box. Let's now save this. Now we need to give some content to this box, and as you can see we are going to align two things in horizontal direction. So again we are going to need a stack with direction row. Okay, so first thing that I'm going to give this stack is direction, and that will be row. And apart from that we are also going to give it some CSS properties. So let's just give it height of 100%. Okay, and then some padding. So we will assign it a padding of 2, that means 2 times 8 or 16 pixels, right? After that we also need to give it property like align item center. Okay, and justify content space between, just like this. Then also some spacing. So let's give it a spacing of 3, that means 24 pixel, that is 3 times of 8 pixel. Now we need to give it this typography. Okay, contact information, that is a text. So we are going to use this typography component from material UI again. So let's just write it quickly, contact info, right? And after that we also need to render an icon button. Okay, so let's use this icon button component again from material UI, and inside this, as you can see, we need to render this cross icon. So this is, you can find it by the name of X in our icons library, that is phosphor icon. So if I'm going to write X, then you will get this suggestion of X from phosphor react. So let's just import it. Now as you can see, after we save this, you can see we get this contact information with this cross icon. Okay, we need to define some variant in order to style our text properly. So the variant here is going to be subtitled to. Okay, let's save this, and now you can see it's looking much better. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write here an on click. Okay, on click event, I'm going to listen to it, and whenever this event occurs, okay, then we are going to dispatch toggle sidebar that we created. Okay, so let's just get the dispatch here first of all. So we can get it like this: dispatch is equal to use dispatch, and use dispatch is going to come from react-redux library. Okay, now we can use this dispatch to call the thunk. Okay, so the thunk is that we are going to call is toggle sidebar from our app slice. Okay, so just like this. Now let's save this. Okay, format it, and now if I click on this cross icon, then you can see we get the functionality, and our UI is already taking shape. Now let's move on to the other part. We have created this box which is actually the header. So let's write a comment here. This is the header. Now we need to create the rest of the body. So rest of the body is going to be created starting from this line. Okay, so as you can see, there are many things that are going to be aligned in a vertical direction in this body. So I'm again going to use another stack for that purpose. I hope this is clear to you. And now we are going to again give it some styling. So the first thing that we are going to give it is height, and that is going to be 100%. okay, as much as it can take. And then the position, and it's going to be relative, so let's give it a position of relative. And also, as you can see that this is going to be rendering on different types of screen, that means different sizes of screen. So we will need a scroll functionality for this body part. So that's why we are going to give it this property of flex grow 1. That means it is going to take as much space as it can take, okay, in the vertical direction. And also we are going to give it overflow by scroll. That means the overflow behavior should be scroll. Now after we have done this, we also need few other things like padding and spacing. So let's give it a padding of 3, that is 24 pixels, and a spacing of 3 also, that is again 24 pixels. After this, the first thing that we need to focus on is we need to render this avatar along with this name and contact number. So we can use a stack to align things in the horizontal direction, and to align these two in vertical direction we can again use a stack and give it a direction of column, and the first stack will have a direction of rows. So let's use that stack here, okay. And then we are going to give it few properties. The first one is going to be align item center, and then the direction is going to be row, okay, as I just explained you. And there is also going to be some spacing, so let's give it a spacing of 2, that is 16 pixel. Now we can render our avatar component. So for that we can use this built-in avatar component from material UI. We just need to provide it source, okay. Now as you already know from the previous part, we can use faker library here to just render a image, okay. So let's first get this faker library imported here, okay. So just like this, you can also import this faker library from faker.js, so package that we are using, okay, in our project. So after you importing this faker, we can call image on this, and then I can call avatar and call it just like this. And we can also pass an alt attribute to this. So again we can use faker library. So here I'm going to just give it a fake name, okay, first name. And we can also give it some styling. So I'm going to give it a height of 64, okay, and also width of 64. Now after we make these changes, let's save it and see what we get. And here you can see we have a nice avatar, okay. Now after this, we are again going to need a stack to group two text vertically, okay, this name and the contact number. So let's first give this stack a spacing, and that is going to be actually 0.5. That means we want to give it a spacing of 0.5 multiplied by 8, or 4 pixels, right? So let's just use the typography component quickly, okay. Then we are going to give it some variant. So let's give it a variant of article, okay. This is going to give it the styling as per our theme. And also we are going to increase its font weight. So let's give it a font weight of 600. And then we can just render some fake name from the faker library here. So let's use it, faker dot name dot full name. We are going to use full name here. And similarly, like this, we can also use a contact number. So let me just write a very fake number here. So I'll write something like this. So we are going to give it a variant of body 2 and font weight of 500. So let's now see what we get. And yeah, it's looking much better. Now after this, you can see we are going to render this audio and video calling feature, okay. We are going to render that type of UI. So clearly you can see we need to align these two things in the horizontal direction, and we need to group this text and icon button in the vertical direction. So again we are going to use a stack for that purpose. So just after this stack, we can use another stack, okay, and give it a direction of again row, as I've just explained you, okay. And then few other properties, align item and justify content. So here align items is just going to be center, okay, because we want the line passing through the center, okay, horizontally to align. And then we also want justify content to be spaced evenly, okay. In this case we are going to give it space evenly because we want some little spacing from the left and right and also in between. So we are going to give it justify content space evenly. And then we are going to use another stack to group this icon button and the text vertically. So that's why we are using this stack. Let's now give it some spacing. So we are going to give it a spacing of 1, and there is also going to be a property called align items, and we want it to be center. Okay, and after this we can render our icon button and the text that we want here. Okay, so let's use this icon button component, and first thing that we need is a phone, which is going to come from this phosphor react library. So let's just import it. Okay, and after that we are going to again make use of the typography component to render text, and as you already know, we need to give it some variant. So we are going to give it a variant of overline. So let's write variant name. Variant is going to be overline, just like this, and then we can write the text here. So the text is going to be voice. Let's format it, save it, and see what we get on our screen. And now you can see we get our desired result, a stack which is going to contain a different icon and also a different text. And just for the record, we can also map it here. Okay, we can create a list and then we can map it, but for now I'm just going to again copy and paste it here. Okay, and I'm going to just change the text here to video and this icon to video camera, just like this, from post for react. Let's save this, and yeah, now it's taking shape. So the next thing is we need a divider and then these text, and then again a divider. So let's just get this done. Okay, so after this stack, we are just going to use a divider, which is again a component from material UI. So this can't get any simpler than this. Okay, so let's just save this after importing from the material UI, and you get your divider. Okay, just like in our design. After this, we can render these typography. Okay, so let's just write that. So again, we are going to make use of this stack component. Okay, then we will give it some spacing and some other properties. So let's give it a this property of spacing, which is going to be 0.5. Okay, that means 4 pixels, and then we can write the typography. Let's make use of this, and then here the text is going to be hard coded, and then the typography will be actually coming from our API, but for now we are going to again hard code it. So I'm just going to write whatever is there in our design. Okay, hi there, I'm using, or you can also write, and again we can style it using some variant. So let's write this variant property here, and I'm going to give it a variant of body 2, and to this about title we are going to give it a variant of article. Okay, so this is just as per our design, and you can see this is nicely rendered there. And again we are going to need this divider again, so let's just copy and paste it here. Okay, after this is stack, save it, and yeah, we get this. Now after that we are going to render this section where we need this text, and then again this text grouped along with this icon button. Okay, and then we will render some images here. Okay, so let's now focus on that. So what we are going to do, we are going to first need a stack because we need to align few things, okay, in horizontal and vertical direction. So let's just focus on this row, and this row is going to be aligned vertically. So that's why this stack is going to have its default direction, and that is going to be column. Okay, so let's now focus on this. As you can see, in this first row we are going to need the direction of row. So let's just give it a direction of row. Okay, just like this, and align item center, justify content, space between. As you can see, it's already visible in our design. So let's give it this properties, justify content, and that is going to be space between. Okay, just like this. Now we can write the typography here. Typography, inside this we can write media, links, and doc. Okay, then we need to group the text and the icon button together. So here we are going to, so here we are actually going to use a button which is going to have an end icon. Okay, so let's use this button from the material UI. Okay, so this button is actually going to come from material UI package. As you can see here, it's coming from MUI/material core package. Now here we can just give it some text that we want to render. Let's say we have shared 401 media links in docs. Okay, so I'm just going to write it like this, and then we can give it some end icon. Okay, so there is a prop known as end icon, which you can read more about in the material UI's API about button. Okay, so we can just provide it some icon and it will be rendered on the right side of this text. So let's give it a icon of caret right. So this is actually this icon is called caret right in Phosphor React, so we are just using its name. Okay, and when you write it, you can see we are getting this from Phosphor React library, and let's just write it like this. I'm going to save it. Now you can see we get this nice button. Okay, with this text. Now what we can do, we can also provide some variant to this typography to style it properly. So we are giving it a variant of subtitle. Okay, just like this. Let's save this, and now this looks much better. So again, we are going to need to render few images, okay, in a row. So again, we are going to use a stack here with the direction row, just like this. Then we also need to give it some spacing. So let's give it a spacing of 2, that means 16 pixel. And there is also going to be this property align item center. Now we can actually use just a dummy array here to map over. Okay, and then we can render few few images here. Okay, for now. So we are just going to render image element after wrapping it inside the box. So let's use this image tag from HTML. Okay, and then we can just provide it some source, and this image is again going to come from the faker library. So let's use this image. Okay, and then we can choose any image. We are going to choose the image of food here. Okay, and then let's also give it some alt attribute. Here I'm going to give it this name. Okay, let's say we are going to give it full name. Okay, let's call it, and let's, after saving this, we can see the result, and you can see we have few images. Okay, and this is coming up nicely. So after that, we are going to need this divider. So after this stack, we can use a divider component here again, which is from material UI, as you already know. Let's save this, and you can see we get this divider. After this divider, we need to again use a stack to group few things in a row. Let's get this done. Okay, so again we are going to use a stack here, and then you already know the direction is going to be row. Okay, because these its children will be aligned in a row, and then align items center, and then we can also give it some spacing. So we are going to give it a spacing of 2. Now after this, we are going to need this icon, which is called star in Phosphor React library. So I'm just going to import it from the Phosphor React, as you can see here. Okay, just like that. And after this, I'm going to need some typography here. So let's just use this typography, and I'm going to write the content as starred messages as it's given in our design. Okay, Figma design. So this variant is going to be subtitle 2 here for this text, and then we can see what we get, and you can see we get this star with the starred messages. But now we also need to render this caret button, okay, at the right side. So what we are going to do, we are going to wrap this stack again inside a stack. Okay, which will ensure that its children, that means this complete stack along with the icon button that we are just going to make. Okay, this icon button which is going to carry this icon caret right, which is from the Phosphor React library inside it. So now we need to actually give some properties to this stack, this parent stack. Let's format this code so you can understand it clearly. Now you can see this stack is having two children. The first one is this stack containing this icon, star icon, along with the starred messages text, and the other children is an icon button which will be placed at the right side. So it is very clear that we need to give it a direction of row. Okay, and then we need to give align items center, and then we also need to give it this property of justify content space between, because we want its children to be aligned at the extreme ends. Okay, so let's give it this property of justify content space between. Now I'm going to save this, and you can see here in our result we get exactly what we want. Okay, so we can again place this divider exact similar way that we have done here. We can also make this. So let's use this divider from here and place it after this stack. Then I'm going to again copy this stack that we just created, and we will be just changing few things here. The first is going to be this icon. So we need this bell icon, and it's called bell in phosphor react library. So we are just going to import it from the phosphor react. Okay, like this. And we are also going to change this heading, which will be mute notifications. Okay, and in place of this icon button, we are going to actually use the and switch that we created here, as you can see. So we created this and switch in the previous parts, so I'm going to use it here. We can import it from its neighbor file. Okay, so let me write the import statement here. So we can import and switch its neighbor file and switch, just like this. And now it's going to work. Okay, let's save this again, and now you can see we get exactly what we wanted here. Okay, so the next thing is we also want to increase the size of these icons. So I'm going to give these two icons, this star and the bell icon, I'm going to give these two this prop size, and the size is going to be 21. Okay, so let's just give it to both of these, star and bell icon. Now I'm going to save this, and you can see the size is now looking much better than the previous time. Okay, now we also need again another divider after this stack. So let's just use this, and you can see we get this nice little separation. After this, we are just left with this component. Okay, and this is, if you can compare, this is much similar to this one. Okay, and we just need this title here. So let's get this done quickly. So after this divider, okay, we are going to use this typography component to render our heading. So we are going to write one group in common. So this is just a dummy data. Okay, this is going to actually come from the API. Okay, this one, whatever the number may be. And after that we need another stack. Okay, it is much clearly visible. So in this stack we are actually going to use another avatar component. Okay, then we will give it some source and alt attribute. So let's again give it some source from the Flickr library. We are going to use an avatar image. Okay, and then the alt attribute is going to be some dummy full name. Okay, so let's give it a full name from Flickr library. So it's going to be faker dot name dot full name. Okay, and we are going to call it just like that. And the second sibling to this avatar is again going to be a stack, because that stack is going to align these two things in a vertical direction. Okay, so let's use this stack from material UI, and there is no need to give it any direction, but we are going to give it some spacing. Okay, so let's give it a spacing of 0.5. Okay, and then we can render some typography inside of it. So the first typography is going to have the name of the group that is common. So let's write it coding monk. Okay, coding monk. And we also need to give this typography some variant. So let's give it a variant of subtitle 2. Okay, subtitle 2. Let me correct the spelling. Okay, and similarly like this we can also write another. So we can also write this another typography in which we are going to mention the friends which are common between us and those groups. So let's just write some animal names here. Okay, just for fun. All, parrot, okay, rabbit. You can write your favorite one. Okay, and we are also going to write this u. Okay, which will denote that I'm also in that group. And we can just change the subtitle from subtitle 2 to caption here. Now I'm going to save this, and you can see that we need this avatar and this another stack to be aligned in the horizontal direction. So for that I almost forgot to give this direction of row. Okay, so we are going to give this stack a direction of row, and we also need to give it some spacing. So let's give it a spacing of 2. Let's see if this fixes it. And now you can see this is looking much better. Okay, there is one more thing that we can do here, and that is we can provide it this prop of align item center. Okay, this is actually aligned at the center or in horizontal direction by default, but we are just going to give it this property anyway. Okay, so you can understand. Now after this, you can see in our design we just need to render two buttons, okay, which are going to have this outline variant and this start icon. So let's just get this done very quickly. So what we are going to need is another stack. Okay, so let's use another stack here, and this is going to have direction of row. Okay, this is pretty much clear. And again, it's going to have align items center. Okay, and some spacing between the two buttons, and let's keep this spacing 2. Okay, that means 16 pixel, 2 times of 8 pixel. Then let's just simply use this button from material UI, and we are going to give this text. The first one is going to be for blocking, okay, blocking someone, and the second one is going to delete the chat, okay, or clear the chat. And we can also give this prop of full width to both of them so that they acquire as much space as they can. Okay, so they will get the maximum space, leaving some space between them. Okay, as you can see, it is clearly visible. But there is one more thing, we need them to be outlined, so we can fix that by just giving them this prop of variant, and its value is going to be outlined. Okay, just like this variant is outlined. Let's also give the same to another button. Now after you save this, you can see these buttons are looking much like in our design, but there is one thing that is missing, and it's the start icon. So for that, we also get this start icon prop, okay, in material UI. So we can use that start icon, and we can just pass any icon here that will be displayed. So the first thing, for the block button, I'm going to use an icon called prohibit. So let's just use this from the Phosphor React library. And for deleting, I'm going to use another start icon, and it's going to be called trash. Okay, this is known by the name of trash in Phosphor React library, just like this. So I'm going to use it. Now save your file. Okay, and now you can see that we got our buttons, okay, just like we wanted. So in this tutorial, we have explored how to set up the Redux store, and this is going to make the future task very simple for us. Okay, to manage state of our app, this is going to be a very simple task, and you can already see it in action. Okay, we are able to easily switch this sidebar on and off, and we also rendered this sidebar UI. Okay, and now this app is looking much better. Let's also see if there is any problem in dark mode, and no, it's looking much cool. Okay, so let's close this video right here because this is running pretty long, and I apologize for that. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you find this video informative, and if you are struggling with anything, then you can always join our Discord group. Okay, the link is also given in the description and also on the channel, so you can join that group to get your issues resolved. Make sure to like this video and also subscribe to this channel. I'll see you in the next video.